Yeah, we are, right, okay, good evening. Yes, we are, we got basically to the bottom, so that there's going to be, we're out to the story of Rav Yosef, but before we see the story of Yosef, so I did say to you at the end of the show yesterday that we should do, I mean, we don't normally try and tackle a Tosfos of this length, but this is such a fascinating kind of wide-ranging piece about across the whole of Shas of the question of Groma. You know, what is Groma? That I thought it would be nice to do it inside. Sorry,
I missed last week. What daf?
Sorry, we are Chof base Ahmed base Chof base Ahmed base.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chof base Ahmed base. Chof base. Yeah. Chof base Ahmed base. And basically, just to recap what we did and how we get to the sugi of Groma is we're talking about the Mishnah says you have to distance a ladder from a shovach or a dovecot up 4 amas, so that you don't enter a situation where this little animal, a marten and a mia, jumps up and attacks the doves. So this is clearly thinking ahead a number of steps. You know, you got to make sure when you position your ladder on your property and the other guy's got doves in his property that you don't put it in such a way that an animal might be there at that moment, jump on your ladder and jump in and eat the birds, basically, right? That's the story, right? So Gemora's first says, well, it must be not like Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says it's up to the guy himself to move away. The nizik, the one who's suffering, should move his dovecot, right? That's basically, so we said no, because Rabbi Yossi agrees when it's what's called gerei delay, when it's a direct, you're shooting an arrow and it happens directly. So the Gemora says here as well, you can have a scenario where it's direct. There's this little animal waiting there, and as soon as you put the ladder, it jumps on the ladder and jumps into the dove, right? So it all happens all in one go. But the Gemara says, okay, fine. So you've solved, it's all happening immediately, but it's still Groma. Groma benezikin, Groma hua, right? It's Groma, and the Groma is indirect. Anything indirect, Groma you shouldn't be chayav for. And the Gemara gives this fascinating teretz, which is Zoso Meres, Groma benezikin also. That's what we finish with. Groma benezikin, yeah, when it comes to damages, and it's notable that it says nezikin, because the different types of Groma, there can be Groma with Hilchos Shabbos. We talked about that in the Shir on Shabbos, might come back to that. Right? Is it the same? Indirect action with Hilchos Shabbos, is that the same as Nezikin? We're talking about damages, right? Groma b'Nezikin also is forbidden. Now, you might not be chayav, but it's still not allowed. We're talking here about what you're allowed to do. Are you allowed to position your ladder in such a way that potentially a little animal could jump on it and then eat the doves? The answer is no. Even though we may not be able to be mechayav you, that means to say, you won't necessarily have to pay if the damage happens, okay? And Rashi brought that there's a machlokas about that in Bava Kama. There is a mandomer who says, Lo doin dino de garmi. They wouldn't judge in a court of law. It's not enforceable in a court. You can't get the guy to pay a penalty for the doves being lost, right? But our Mishnah is not talking about penalties. Our Mishnah is talking about issa, what you're not allowed to do. You can't set something up, right, to cause that effect. That's what you can't cause. You with me? Okay? Well, you could perhaps, yes, but consequences might be based in Shalmalo, but also in terms of the rule book, it's you know, you've got to know what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do.
It sounds like it's morally wrong to do it.
No, it's also it's halachically also.
No penalty.
No penalty in a court of law, just because it's not enforceable, because you can only, according to that mandomer. Well, that's a good question. I mean, it might come down to that. Yeah, it might come down to morality. You know, that's interesting. That's interesting. The problem is that if you can't trace the action, at least according to the simple way of understanding it, right, is if you can't trace the action or the outcome directly to the perpetrator, then who says he's liable? Then how can you impose liability?
He hasn't caused damage. It's the animal
Yeah,
that's caused damage.
or whatever, or it's happened in some indirect way. That's right. So Tosfos goes like this. So Tosfos is the last Tosfos on the Omid Zos, yeah, Diramaskel Zos, right? Zos Amesh Groma b'Nezikin Osa. So Tosfos says, when Mekora Sal Kadaitach, the original Havamin of the Gemora was, the Gemora thought, Ki Heichi de Potter, Ki Heichi de Potter, I think the Bach changed it. Yeah, Ki Heichi de Potter, the Bach changes the Gersa Hochinami de Mutter. So the Gemora originally thought that it goes hand in hand. If you are exempt from paying, it's allowed to do. And the Gemara comes up with this, in other words, you should be allowed to put your ladder there. The Gemara comes up with the chidush of the distinction, splitting the two and saying, no, you can have, when it comes to Groma, something that is forbidden to do, you with me? Right? But still no liability. You're not chayav if it happens. That's the Gemara's, right? That's the chiddush of the Gemara. Right? That's what Tosos said. Now the Gemara Tosos goes on to this thing. Hocha mashma. Here the implication is the groma ben nezikin to potter. Here the implication is that groma with nezikin, right? With indirect causation with nezikin is exempt. It's potter. The Chaim preparates that are regular. We find the same thing in Bava Kama. There's a case in Bava Kama. Tosos really does a tour of Shas now. Zora klime rosh hagag. Person throws a vessel from on top of a roof. There were cushions and pillows underneath. V'kodam v'silkon. Afilu hu potter. Even if he runs downstairs, okay, and he removes the cushions, not someone else. Afilu hu. Even he himself, potter. He's still potter. He's still exempt, right? Yeah. From paying for the broken vases. It's an amazing thing. You throw the vase down from the roof, yourself, you chuck the guy's precious Ming vase off the roof, okay? But when you threw it, there were cushions there, pillows, so it wouldn't have broken. And you run downstairs yourself and remove the cushions. And you somehow get there before the vase does, and you sweep away the cushions and the thing smashes on the floor. You're potter.
Why are you potter?
Amazing. It's incredible. Why are you potter? Because it's groma. It's indirect. Indirect. It's not this gravity. It's that when you caused the action, when you threw them, they could not break. A secondary event happened, even though it was you, and you removed it. I mean, at the end, it's going to try and understand the reasons. Okay, so you see that, yeah, it's another case where you see clearly that you are potter for causing such damages. All right. Well, let's get on to, let's just see the cases. Let's see a whole, as I said, it's a survey of cases, so keep them all in your mind. Of the Perikapora, next case, the case in Perikapora, which is also Bava Kama. This is a case where a person brings fruit into someone else's courtyard without permission. The Kama be Gemora, and the Gemora says, Dim ochla v'huska potter. Okay, if the animal, the other guy's animal, I think this is the case, the other guy's animal consumes the fruit that you brought in, you understand? He's got an animal in his foot. Well, bias his animal, yeah, and it was injured because it ate the fruit, overate or ate dodgy for whatever it was, right? You are again potter because it's also groma, it's also indirect. You know, you putting the fruit there, the animal chose to eat the fruit. It's not a direct causation, okay? V'nosan sam hamoves, another case, this is the third case. V'nosan sam hamoves, if a person puts poison, if behemas chaveroi, person puts poison in front of his friend's animal, that's really close to being direct, but not quite. Yeah, the potter, you're also exempt. There's another case there. Amazing, isn't it? What you can get away with. So that's what we have to understand why, right? Well, you can't get it. All these things, again, are not necessarily allowed, but they are potter in a court of law. What?
The case of the field.
Yes.
The man in the field. You set fire to the field.
We're getting to the field now. We're getting to the fire now. Another case in Bava Kama is a person sends a fire, flaming torch, in the hand of a chera shota or cotton, right? So these people don't have any ability to control what they do, but nevertheless, you're still potter. You gave it to them, but it's indirect. You didn't set the fire. No, setting the fire is different. Setting the fire is direct.
Right.
And it's a chiddush. It's a chiddush because you could say, well, it's, you know, you light it here and it goes over there, and that's the machlokas Rabbi Birnbaum Shlokish. We mentioned that in the show on Shabbos, whether it's Eishim Mishum Chitzov, Eishim Mishum Momoino, right? In other words, what's the liability for lighting a fire? You light a fire in your property and it causes a fire somewhere else. There's a debate whether that's the fire's like your property damaging or it's like shooting an arrow. But either way, that's not wrong because you lit the fire. You lit the fire, right?
It's a warning.
Pardon?
It's a warning if you warn someone to do that.
Want something to do what?
No, normally with the love, you have to warn them before they do it. Here,
That's to get malchus, but not payment. Not for payment. No. You pay. If you damage, you pay.
And he then does it.
I don't think it makes a difference. You still not. If it's groma, you're going to be potter. If it's groma, yeah, I think so. Right? Another case there is someone also in Bava Kama, someone who breaks down a fence from the other guy's animal. It's got his prize bull, and you knock down the fence. And the prize bull escapes and causes havoc, whatever. Again, it's not direct damage. Groma. The kofif komas chaver b'fnei adaleko. Someone who bends over his friend's standing corn in front of a fire. That's another case where you're potter, right? So this is interesting because I imagine it must be that you're not directly placing it in the fire. It must be can't remember exactly, but it must be some situation where you bend down, therefore the fire can get there and there will be, it will destroy it. Another case is very interesting case. A person who performs forbidden work, that's a form of melacha with the water which has in it the ashes of the paraduma. Now you do that, you messed up big time, right? That was very rare, right? The ashes of the paraduma. If you decide to do some form of melacha with this jug of water which has the ashes of the paraduma in, you've ruined them. But it's groma. It's not direct. Yeah, it's also groma. It's also indirect. Yeah, you could ask, that's hezek shein and nikah, really. It's not visible damage. The Gemara saying, why is it groma? Why is it groma? I don't know. It's indirect. Why is it indirect? I suppose the indirect damage is the outcome of it is you can't use it for tara. It's indirect. All you did was some malacha with it, and the outcome of that was, yeah, it's interesting that case is included as well. The libo v'lipsa ruach depota, okay, depota v'chalav, and the libo v'lipsa ruach. That's a case where you light the fire, and it only causes a fire because there's both you and the wind. You are libo, you light a fire, v'lipsa ruach, and the wind also lights the fire. So the two of you together, you and the wind, right? And cause the fire. Without that, wouldn't happen. To potter, you'll be potter. In that case, as the Gemara says in Perek HaKoines. Next case, umavis chaveroi. Now, I think that case is where you scare someone. Mavis is to scare. So you scare someone, and presumably, well, imagine they injure themselves as a result. You make them jump or something, and they have some injury as a result. Again, dovinami groma. That's also indirect. Keda'omba b'perek kama de kiddushin, as the Gemara says in the first perek of kiddushin. Di'ihu da'avis anafshay, because he scared himself. Right, effectively, right? Okay, this is how you got to know Shas, right? You got to be able to place a pin through the whole of Shas and find immediately every case of groma, right? This is how it goes, right? So he scared himself. Another case in Bava Kama, which is again one of the ones I mentioned from Shabbos in the Shir. And for those who weren't here, we gave a Shir on Shabbos on the liability for driverless cars, which is a really hot topic. It was actually in the news this week. The Law Commission produced a report this week. Anyone who wants them, I can put them on. I can send them on the group offers, whatever. But basically, this weekend, the Law Commission produced a report about liability, and they've come up with a very big chiddush in this country, which is that basically, predominantly liability is actually going to rest with the manufacturer. It's really interesting with the manufacturer. In other words, when you're
relying on them.
Yeah, but it's a massive change in the law. Like, you're going to be constantly, there's going to be a whole new category in law. The driver is not going to be called a driver. You're going to be called, what do they call them? A user in charge. Like a new whole, well, it's going to be a completely new set of, new category, right? User in charge, but you're not liable. The manufacturer will be liable. So we discussed in halacha, who's liable, right? If the car goes malfunctions or whatever. So that we mentioned this Gemora, which is in Bava Kama, Shisa boy Kelev, Shisa boy Nachash Potter. The Gemara says if you incite a dog to cause damage or a snake to cause damage, so you wind the dog up, right? I mean, not literally, but you understand, yeah? You get the dog, make the dog angry until the dog goes and bites someone in the park. What? Incite. Then you're potter. Why? Because it's also indirect. Yeah, it's indirect. You wound it up and then the dog went and caused damage. Okay? Now, up to this point, all Tosfos has done. Okay? It's why you have to, this is why it's interesting sometimes just to get an opportunity to learn a slightly longer Tosfos. You get to understand the structure, how it works. This is really massively important, understanding Rishonim. So basically, Tosfos has just built up a list of cases to substantiate what the Gemara says here, support it. We find elsewhere in Shas as well that Groma ben Ezekiel is potter, is exempt. Now he asks like this: we have to try and give a reason. Hani midino degar mi. What is the difference between these cases and there's something called dino degar mi? Now there's two things. There's groma and garmi. Garmi, simply put, is more direct than groma. Still indirect, but more direct. Right, more direct. And he's going to give a few examples of this. Kagoin achve achui da hagozel Basra. Look up that case. That's the case that goes on Basra, the last parak of Bava Kama. Achve means to show. I think he shows something which causes a loss. I think he shows. I'm trying to remember that case. 1 second. Kuf. Tes Zion on the base in where is it? I think it means I think he shows. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So the case is that the person didn't steal himself. He heard from the Beis HaMelech, Shemavakshin Lirag, she says, they hears that the king or the local ruler wants to grab fields, okay, wants to steal fields, and he shows them, that's Achme, to show, take this land. He shows them, take this land. They're looking to steal fields, and he shows them he doesn't really like his neighbor, Joe. So he says, Joe's got some land. That's what he does, right? And the king there goes and takes the land, right? That's the case when the Gemora says there is the Archayev, right? Umara dina l'shulchani. Not everyone holds with Chayev in these cases, but some people do. Umara dina l'shulchani v'nim tzara. That was another case I mentioned on Shabbos, where you show a coin to a money changer, and it's dodgy and it's bad, and as a result you lose money because the money changer said, yeah, this is legal currency, this is legal tender. It turns out to be counterfeit currency, and you therefore lose because you tried to use it and it was dodgy. Okay, okay, yeah, the shulchani in certain cases, not every case, but in certain cases the money changer is liable. And you could say that's also indirect. The money changer said that the coin was dodgy, was counterfeit. You went and used it, and it was turned out that it was in fact a bad coin, and we can impose liability on the money changer. I think the money
changer said it's good.
No, the money changer said it's good, but it wasn't. He messed up.
He didn't say it was good.
No, sorry. Yeah, he messed up. Sorry, he said it was good and it wasn't. So you can go back to the money changer. Yeah, exactly. Unless I think the Mishnah says, or Gemora says, unless the money changer is like a super expert and it was a complete onus. There was no way he could have known it was a problem because he was an acclaimed expert in the field. Sometimes people can forge something which is just impossible to tell, right? Okay. But generally speaking, you have recourse to the money changer. And then the Gemara Toras brings some other examples as well. This is where we had this in the beginning, I think, when the wall breaks down between two fields, and therefore, as a result, where you have a field and there's a problem of kilayim, because if the fields mix, the produce is going to become forbidden because of kilayim. So you can say to him, Gadar, build the wall up. If he doesn't, we had this at the very beginning of the Masechta. If he doesn't, what's the halacha? You can be chayav. You're chayav for causing him to lose, causing his field to be destroyed. The dones adin. The chayav remeh afilu nosan v'nosan biyodo. This is a fascinating question. Donis adin is a dayan who judges a case and it's wrong, so he judged incorrectly. Okay, he judged incorrectly, and money changed hands on the basis of the psak. What happens is the liability for the dayan. So according to Rameh, he can be chayav, and I'm sure there's a lot, obviously, depending on the case, how, what, where, fine, whatever, right? But he can be chayav in certain cases, even if he didn't actually physically hand the money over, but he just paskened a certain way, and then there was a exchange of money or whatever. Again, that you could argue indirect. I didn't directly take the money from him and give it to him, right? These are all cases where you could say, hold on a minute, well, why are these cases is you chayav and other cases you're not?
What I'm saying, in English law, that judges are protected from being sued for giving the wrong judgment in a monetary case.
Are they?
You don't sue judges if they get it wrong.
Well, what about, no, I'll tell you what it is also. No, there's a question. The Gemora talks about different types of making a mistake. You can have a mistake in Svara, where you think a certain way, whatever, you made logical, came to logical conclusions, that's one thing. But then there's a more severe case of mistake, which is what we call Tal Bidvar Mishnah, where someone makes a mistake in learning. Didn't look up didn't know the halacha properly or something, which is more serious. It's like a judge not knowing the statute. It's like a judge ruling that someone goes to prison for 10 years when he didn't realize that there was one factor we didn't think of.
Would it deter people from becoming dayanim?
Probably would.
So can you sue the dayan? So I missed that.
I don't know if you can sue a dayan. Don't quote me on this. Whether you can sue a dayan or not. But the point is that there is potential liability. There can be cases. I don't know, and I don't remember how exactly Paskin is going just according to the opinion of Reb Meir. He's just trying to find cases that way there is potential liability, at least according to some views, and we're trying to understand why. Another case of someone who burns another guy's documents. Let's say you burn his documents. He's got a document, claim to a field, legal claim to a field. You set fire to it. He's got no legal claim anymore, no proof. So again, that's another case where there is liability. Why? Indirect. That's the classic case of Groma, right? It's indirect. You burn the documents, we can't claim the field. You with me, right? All we're doing, we bought one list where you're potter, and we'll bring a whole other list where you're chayav. Why? Okay?
Well, because you've caused the damage.
Well, this we're going to get to the chiluk in a second. So this is a case where you sell a document, you sell a shtar-chov. Shtar-chov is where someone owes you money, okay? And you sell that right to claim the money to someone else. But then you go back to the original guy who owes you money and you moichel it. It's like a sneaky thing to do. So the guy you sold it to can no longer claim. Oh, what a crook, right? You understand? You sold him the money, you took his money, and now he comes up with a document to the other guy, and the guy says, "What do you mean? He forgave the loan." It's a criminal, right? Anyway, all these cases, there is liability. You'll be relieved to hear. But why the first set is there not? V'chilek Rabbeinu Yitzchak. Rabbeinu Yitzchak made the following distinction, Loshen Echad, in one version. The dino de garmi chayev, hainu she'oisehu atzmai hezek l'moman chaveroi. That the first approach, he says, is why is these cases which we call garmi, you are liable, is because you yourself damaged someone else's property. So if you look at all of these cases, you can see that all of them is directly you yourself, okay? Whereas, in other words, you incited the dog, which kind of thing. You sowed the coin, the money changer seized the coin, right? You what? Yeah, you burned the shtar. All these things, right? You were moichel of debt. All these things, right? Whereas the first set of all the other lists we brought before, it's not the same. You brought fruit into someone's courtyard, which the animal then decided to eat. You put a torch. Yeah, chucking the vases down. That's a bit of a difficult, isn't it? What was that?
That's because of
You somehow managed to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It's difficult. It's difficult.
It was on side when the ball was kicked, so when he threw the thing, it was the cushion was there.
It's very difficult to understand what the cushion case. Why should you be part in that case? According to this principle, it does very much sound like Garmi. There's a whole discussion. Well, you see, it might be that you need the second distinction as well. I've got written in notes here from many years ago. It's very faint. Someone says something like,
when you're taking the pillows away, that action is not actually of any consequence. It's only because there's something coming down that's going to be smashed. It's not. Do you see what I'm saying?
well, you're still doing the action, right?
It's still doing the action, but
it's irrelevant.
it's an irrelevant action.
It's an irrelevant
That's
action.
only relevant.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's what you have
Yeah.
before.
You did the thing before as well.
Yes.
That's the trick.
That's
Yeah.
but the
yeah.
final thing is-
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I've got written on the site that I must have discussed this with Rabbi Yosef Aaron Oppenheimer, who's one of the Magidish in Gateshead, because when I was learning this in Gateshead, this was about 20 years ago. It's a bit faint, the pencil now. But anyway, he suggested that basically that there's this opinion of the Re and the next bit, the Oid, they are two simonim, two signs of identifying, like two halves of a whole, of how to identify what Garmi is. These are signs you look for if you're trying to work out whether it's Garmi or Groma. One of the signs you look for is it him himself doing it, or is it some causation that's a different thing, right? The second way he says of looking at it, makes another distinction. The dinner de Garmi de Chayev, the dinner de Garmi, when he's Chayev, Hainu, that is, he says, the B'shas Maisa Bo Hezek. When is Garmi? What is Garmi? Fundamentally, this is very important. Garmi is when it happens then. B'shas Maisa. The damage happens then. That means to say, you burn the documents of someone else. When is the damage? Now. Okay? The damage is now, right now. Okay.
Damage to the documents or damage to the overall composition?
The hezek, what? The hezek is the fact that you can't claim, right? And that happens then. That happens then. You're mochel the chayv, you're mochel the debt. That happens now. That is. Yeah, you could, but you can also look at it in the sense that the document's gone now. That's the damage. It's true, but because it's yeah, I hear what you're saying, 100%. I hear what you're saying, but that's how he seems to be looking at it.
Legal consequences immediate. So,
Yeah.
There's no concept of psikresha in Nazikin, as in one is
no,
direct.
that's a really good point. It doesn't. No, right. That's right. That's a unique. It's interesting. Psikresha does apply in other areas of halacha, I believe, but I don't think it's here. There are. It's not. It is primarily Shabbos, of course, but I think there are other applications of psikresha where something is inevitable. I can't recall offhand.
so would it make a difference
But it's-
if he's burning the start to warm himself through the cold? Would that be different?
No, because that's all to do with malacha. Dovashe miskaven. Psikresha is a thing. Is like a bolt-on for a dovashe miskaven. In other words, dovashe miskaven and Shabbos is potter, right? Dovashe miskaven, is in fact mutter. Dovashe miskaven, unintentional mutter, but not if it's a psikresha. If it's inevitable that you're going to do the malacha, it's not mutter. You with me? Dovashe miskaven is mutter on Shabbos, right? If it's unintentional, it's mutter. Oh, well, no, you don't do anything. No, you can't. If it's a psikresha, you can't cut off a chicken's head. That's psikresha, cut off the head, yeah? You can't cut off a chicken's head and say it's not going to die. It's going to die, right? Yeah? You're going to drag a heavy bench along grass, it's going to make a furrow. That's the classic case, yeah? That's called psikresha. But you're right, I think that is really Hilchos Shabbos primarily, right? But this idea of it happening, with immediacy, b'shas ma'aser bo hezek, it's fascinating because if you now consider the earlier cases, right, like the jug, the damage does not happen b'shas ma'aser. There is a delay. It happens at a later point, right? And similarly, all these other cases like putting poison in front of the other guy's animal, it's not immediate, right? There's a delay there of some sort. All these type of things. Valakol kosher, says Tosfos, but on all of these, everything there's a problem with tier es hatome. Tier es hatome, where a person, this I think is a case where a dayan or a rov paskend that something which is tome is really tohar, okay, right? So there was something which was tome, and he thought it was tohar, but it wasn't. And the balabayas himself took the fruit which he thought was tohar, but was really tome, and he mixed it up with his own fruit, and apparently there's liability there for the person who said it was tome. Tahar, right? You understand what happened? You have some fruit, okay? Psak was given, this fruit is tahar. In the meat, it was wrong. Really, it was tome. The guy takes the fruit thinking, oh, great. And he puts it back into a massive truckload of other fruit, thereby making all that fruit tome. That's a major loss in those days, right? Major loss. You're talking about serious damage. It could be a whole I don't know, field's worth of pomegranates become tome. And the halacha is that the person who said they were tar is chayev. V'amai chayev, says Tosfos, tu atzma ina osa hezek moment chaveroi. He himself didn't cause that damage, so it doesn't fit with the first criteria of the re. V'gam ba'osa shah shematayer ina bo hezek. At the moment that he's matayer, there's no damage. He just paskin that the fruit was tar. The damage is later. The damage only when he mixes it up with the fruit. So both of those reasons do not apply in that case. So why should there be liability there? So it's not so, as we say, clear cut. So the Ritzbah gives another suggestion. V'nira Ritzbah. You have to realize when you're learning Tosfos, you are learning the accumulated wisdom of, all of the Gedolei Hadar of, the generations after Rashi. That's what you're learning. That is what Tosfos is, right? It is the 11th, 12th century of the Rhineland. We have to remind ourselves just what you're doing here. This is what it is. I mean, there's many more Tosfos not printed on the page, of course, right? Lots of other Svarim, when we did the tour of England. Number of you were on that tour, right? We did in town. So he said, talk about Tosfos Chachmei Anglia. I have to say for a home. Tosfos Chachmei Anglia. They're also writing Tosfos at the same time. Venira it's about the Dinah de Garmi, where it's considered to be more direct. The second set of cases, Hovi Mitzam Knas. It's a fine. It was a special fine with Rabbanon. Really, you shouldn't be chayav, but it's a knas. As is proven in Yerushalmi, lakach, and therefore, kol hezek hamotsui, any damage which is common for rogil lovoi and is frequent, usual to come, konsu chachomim, the sages impose the fine. The tam de konsu, why did they impose the fine in those cases? So no one should, otherwise everyone's going to go ahead and damage other people with impunity, basically. They're just going to go ahead and just cause all this damage. They had to put a boundary on it somehow. And that is why, pardon? Yes, Garmi, yeah. He's explaining why was it, in other words, the Ritzbah is saying like this, really, there isn't a logical distinction, as the Re wanted to suggest, between the cases, right? As Tosfos proved, because we've got a case where a person makes the fruit tomei and really tahar, and really it was tomei, and he goes and mixes it up with the other fruit. Well, it's complete doesn't fit either of the criteria, and yet it's still considered to be garmi. So the Ritzbah goes a different line to the Re. The Re wanted to find a distinction in fact. There's a distinction in the cases in fact. It's media, it's him. The Ritzbah says no. The distinction is simply that Chazal, in certain cases, imposed as a knas, right, that there will be liability, even though really, and that's what we call garmi, and really, even though really those cases of garmi, there should be a patur because of groma. Really, they should be the same as groma. But Chazal said in these cases, we're going to make you liable. And the reason is, otherwise, everyone's going to cause massive damage in all sorts of cases, which we can't allow. That's also the reason he says, what we find many times in the Gemora, there's a concept of hezek she'inu nikah. Mentioned before, you cause damage, but it's not visible. What's an example of hezek she'inu nikah? Where you cause damage, but it's not visible at all.
The main part.
What? Yeah, that would be one example of chara, where you take the meipora and but there's others as well. Pardon? Reputational damage, maybe, although that's also probably groma as well. There's a more basic case, avodah zarah. That is not necessarily in a nikah, because there you have done so you can't see where it is. I don't know if that's hezek she'inu nikah. I'm not sure, because you've actually put the milk in the cholent.
Yes, and you don't know.
Yeah, but that's the thing, I'm not sure whether that's in a nikah. Does in a nikah mean I can't see it, or does it mean there's been no physical difference made? So in your case, you pour enough milk in that it's not bottled. Right, that's So it's not. In fact, I can't find the milk, but I know the milk is in there. I'm not sure. But a simple example: you take someone's I don't know, whatever. Chomesh of Pesach is hezek she'inu nikah. Right. So in other words, I'm just wondering, what's the case where you take?
So you think you sold it to a Rav and the Rav hasn't sold it, right?
Okay, that's again back to the Rav again.
No, again, you sold it to someone else, okay, or.
Okay, right, okay, yeah, exactly, right, you're right. You're right, it is, exactly. Chomesh of Pesach, whatever, is going to be hezek she'inu nikah. You can't see the damage, but it's damage, right? You can the example I was thinking was avodah zarah. What?
Cooking with the pot of
What you mean if the food becomes osa?
Or no, the pot itself.
Or the pot itself, yeah. You got any case where we do with this surim. The example I was thinking was avodah zarah. Potentially, there's different cases and ramifications, where, how, whatever. But think of avodah zarah. Someone bows down to someone's prize apple tree. That's hezek she'inu nikah, right? You made that avodah zarah. Okay, you can't do that. I mean, you can't say ain't the most of shalo. You can't necessarily forbid something that's not yours, whatever. But that's an example again where you can make something that's hezek she'inu nikah. You can't see it, but it could be still damaged. What? Truma. What about how? In other words,
someone non-eligible for truma eats it.
But then you ate it. That's real damage because you consumed it. You made it tomei would be an example of hezek she'inu. Yeah. I think exactly. Smoking. Why? What do you mean hezek by injuring someone through smoking?
Yeah, not direct.
That's nikah. That's nikah. You could say it's groma, but it's yeah. The efsha, he says, and it could be the b'shogeg if it was even unintentional, unwitting. Nami konis Reb Meir. Reb Meir might also impose the fine, because Rameh is the one who says you're chayav if your person died and judged it incorrectly, whatever. It could be the Rameh is mechayev, even makes a knas, even b'shogeg, ki hechi the konis b'metame or medamea echad shogeg v'echad mezid. Just like he says that he imposes a knas if a person is metame something or medamea. Medamea is truma. That's when you make that. Medamea is when you make something sofik truma. Basically, you mix truma into a load of chulin to such a proportion that it all becomes osa. It's medamea, right? So right, echad shogeg echad mezid, and he says whether you did it b'shogeg or b'mezid, you're chayav. So this is really fascinating, right? You've got two different approaches in Tosfos to the whole concept of groma. What do we see in our Gemora? Groma b'nezikin is potter. That's what we said, right? Groma b'nezikin is potter. Says Tosfos, that's true. Many other places in Shas, you find the same thing. You're potter. And again, what we said, that doesn't mean that you can do it. That's our Mishnah. It's also to do, but you won't be liable in a court. Says Tosfos, hold on a second. I've got loads of other cases, which we call garmi, where you are chayav. You know, the Ramban wrote a whole Kuntrus. There's a whole work of the Ramban called Dino de Garmi. This is like a massive topic, like in the Rishonim. This is like, this is huge. That's why I think it was worth doing this Tosfos, because it really cuts across so many sugyas. Just such useful information, knowledge to have in Shas, right? I've got all these other cases, says Tosfos, which we call Garmi, where there is a chiyuv. Says Tosfos, two approaches. The Re says there's a difference in fact, either because they're cases where you do it yourself, or because, and we said maybe they're sort of one and the same, they're just two different simonim, signs that he's looking for to sort of, the way Rabbi Yosef Aaron Oppenheim put it was that that he is, it comes immediately through his own actions, something like that, right? It comes immediately.
Direct and immediate.
Yeah, it's direct and immediate, directly through, well, not direct, but close to direct, and something which comes through his own actions, and something that's immediate. That's right. The Ritzbah doesn't like that, because there are cases where clearly they don't fit the criteria. The case when you have the fruit, that a person, that the Rav says it was Torah, when really it was Tomei, and he mixed it up and he's chayav, right? So therefore the Ritzbah says it's nothing to do with that. It's simply a knas. These cases, the Garmi cases, Chazal identified certain situations where if they didn't say that you were chayav, it would create massive problems. People would go and damage other people's property or whatever, right? Now, so that's Tosfos, which I hope you agree was worth seeing and going through.
Is there though, you follow through Chazal's logic as to why they imposed it in those cases?
No, so that you'd have to look really in a way at each one, and you'd have to ask yourself, which we're not going to do. You're not going to each one and ask yourself why, why there specifically was it, more of a reason to say there's a chiyuv. Yeah, that's not so clear. Not so clear exactly why. Maybe because it's more frequent, more common occurrence. That's the implication of Tosfos. The other thing one has to.
Sorry, does that mean that the knas then only applies to those situations?
Seems to be.
And to no others that you.
Well,
you can't learn anything out to.
Yeah. That's the problem. That is the problem. That is exactly the problem. Can you learn out from here, therefore, to other cases? That's right. According to the way Tosfos seems to say it, it might be that it might be that you can't learn out to other cases. Not simple at all. So this
must be able to learn out from other, because they're bringing general principles, aren't they? They're saying the damage occurred. He calls the damage, and the damage occurred at the time.
Well, it's not so clear. That's the problem, because according to the way Tosfos is saying it, it's a knas. Now, if it's a knas, if it's a knas, he doesn't hold of the re. He doesn't hold of those criteria of him himself. He doesn't hold of any of that. He just says it's a knas that Chazal imposed in these cases, because otherwise everyone will cause each other damage. So it could be that we can't identify others unless we see clearly that's what Chazal did.
So yeah. Why doesn't he hold with the re?
Because he says there are cases which don't fit that criteria, and the Gemora calls them garmi, like the case of where you're matame the parents. One case will destroy the theory. But what's interesting, and this is really the final point to really basically on this point, was that we mentioned on Shabbos, is that there is a difference between Nezikin and Shabbos. Groma is very important for Shabbos, right? How you define what Groma is. And one of the key criteria with Groma on Shabbos, as far as I know, is the idea of delayed action, right? That it doesn't happen immediately. You do something, and at there's a debate in the poskim, I think, what's called a delay, right? It was called a delay. So for example, let me get this right. There are many poskim, I think all poskim hold that opening a fridge and the light going on is not groma. Why?
Because it happens immediately.
Yeah, exactly. You open the fridge. That's like pressing the light switch. You open the fridge. So what? There's a whole question about whether or not that's it's is it psik resha? It is a psik resha. Of course, it's a psik resha. You say it's psik resha. There's a debate whether that is even a psik resha. It might be just a light switch. You're turning the light switch on. Whatever. The point is, it's not groma. It's not indirect because there's no delay there. That action of opening the fridge turns the light on, which is clearly why it's also. I mean, you can't do groma on Shabbos either. Do you understand? But you can't approach that issue with an argument of groma. Does that make sense? Right? Yeah. Because
The delay on the switch.
and that was the Shabbos switch, which maybe we'll have to do a share on that one point. The famous controversy over the Shabbos switch a few years ago. Yeah, this guy in America came up with this wonderful idea. A little box that goes on top of all your switches in the house. You flick the switch, and it checks every 10 seconds or so whether the switch has been flicked. This guy was convinced it's going to make him millions. Yeah. Every Jewish home, you've done away with any time switches. Well, yeah, change right. You've done away with any concept of time switches. You can go around your house 10 seconds later. You go, 5 seconds. No, I can wait 5 seconds for the light to come on. It's called the Shabbos switch. Well, Rabbi Weiss. I heard Rabbi Weiss speak about it. He came to a conference of European rabbis. It was a tour de force. Rabbi Weiss is just unbelievable, these things. It was a complete tour de force because he's so prepared. Rabbi Shua, it doesn't just know it's the way he delivers it and how prepared he is. He came to give the shir to the Rabbanim. This is Rabbanim across the whole of Europe. It was a conference of European rabbis. I think it was in Toulouse. It was about 7 or 8 years ago. And he came to the conference, and one of his gaboim had already the tshuva printed, gave out the tshuva, and then he took everyone through it. Do you understand? It was like so prepared, like it was there. And he came out with basically saying that he held that it was basically potentially even also min haTorah. Amazing. Because it was basically the malacha. You designed a way to do the malacha through an inbuilt groma action, but that was the normal way. It became something like the normal way of doing it, which just defeats the whole purpose. And then you get into complications about where groma is applied in a halachically acceptable way, which is, for example, the wheelchairs on Shabbos, like the summit. What? That's not groma. When we talk about groma is applied in halacha, in many cases, for medical purposes, right? Like a wheelchair, right? The Shabbos-friendly wheelchairs, they work on the basis of groma. They don't only work on the basis of groma, but one of the ways they work is groma. There's other lomdas there. They also work on the basis of varying the current, right, which is also another heter, right? That's how they also. But again, the point he made very clearly in that shir was you can't. It's a totally different category of halacha. Why? Because it's for particular medical needs. There are many army needs. They've designed all sorts of systems in the army on Shabbos as well, right? Where, again, they don't need to mechalel Shabbos. They can avoid doing mechalel Shabbos, right? But they design various things like gramophones and stuff. It's amazing. Yeah, seriously.
You don't want a groma gun, do you?
I don't know about groma gun, but as far as I know, they designed these gramophones. Hospitals have gramophones. You can do it, but it's by definition for a particular medical need, and we brought on Shabbos this tshuva of Shlomo Zalman in Alicha Shlomo, who says that if the Bailim themselves cause the action, then he can't come along himself and say they own it themselves. This is when he's a shomer, your own animal. Right? You can't come and say, it was a groma. If you open the door of your shed where you've got the dangerous bull in, and the dangerous bull then goes ahead and causes damage because you open the door on your own shed and let your own bull out, you can't say it's groma, right? That defeats the whole concept of a sharatam and a shamur. And you with me? Yeah, it's completely doesn't fit at all.
If someone did it deliberately on someone else's door.
Yeah, that's a debate. That's another question. That's already shisui. That's already incitement potentially, or maybe not opening it. But we'll have to draw a line under it. Otherwise, we will go on forever on it. But I hope you feel that was a worthwhile exercise. Let's complete now the Gemora to the Mishnah in the remaining time we have left. Rav Yosef. Last line on the Omud. Rav Yosef Hanu Tali. Rav Yosef had some tali. What a tali? Rashi says the kolim ketanim, little palm trees. Okay, he had little palm trees. Osu umni, top of the next Omud. Umni are bloodletters, which were the doctors of yesteryear. Okay, the Yosfi Tusaihu, and these bloodletters sat underneath the palm trees, as you do. The Osu, and they were treating people, lots of blood. The Osu Urvi, fascinating case, and ravens came. Ochli Damo, they ate the blood from the operation. What? Yeah, but where's leeches?
Oh, but they just cutting.
Yeah, bloodletting. Oh, what? Letting blood, like?
Just cutting.
Yeah.
Oh,
Letting blood until relatively recently, a couple of years ago. That was like no, that was as well. But the other primary form of refor was considered to be bloodletting, right? It was absolutely so. That's what they used to do. So anyway, the ravens came. Ochli Damo, they consumed the blood. The Sulki, the Yosvi, the Tali, they went and sat in the palm trees. Umafsadi Tamri, and they were ruining the dates. No one's going to want to buy or eat dates that have random people's blood on them. It's a recipe for disaster. But you understand what's going on, yeah? The ravens are causing that. What? Yeah, as well, yeah, exactly, a recipe. Omanu Rav Yosef. Now, Rav Yosef said to them, Afikuli Korkomihacha. Rav Yosef was the owner of the trees. He said, get rid for me of these kurkur. Kurkur is the raven. It's kurkur is the noise name. Yeah, it's onomatopoeic. Yeah, kurkur, right? Get rid of the ravens from here. I'm not interested in the ravens. They're causing me damage. I don't want this damage. Omale Abaye. Abaye said to him, hold on a minute. It's indirect. This is groma. How can you get rid of them? You understand the problem? It's completely indirect. They're causing you. You want them to remove. You want. In other words, what do you mean get rid of the ravens? Meaning stop. He wanted to stop the doctors treating people there, right? That's what he wanted. So the ravens wouldn't come. It's indirect. It's groma. They're treating people blood. The ravens come along and take the blood, and that causes damage. What right have you to get rid of them? It's groma. Omale. So he said to him, Rav Yosef back to him. Hochi Omar Rav Tuvi Bar Masna. Rav Tuvi Bar Masna said as follows: Zosei Meres groma benezik and osa. That's the connection to our Gemora. What do you mean? We just said that Rav Tuvi Bar Masna proved from our Mishnah that groma benezikin is also, it's forbidden. So I can get rid of them. It may be that they won't have to pay for the damage to my fruit, but it's also to them to do what they're doing. The Gemara now goes in a different direction. In other words, a different problem. They've got an established chazaka to use that place in order to do what they're doing. In order to do what they're doing, right? They've got an established usage. They've been there however long they've been there, maybe 3 years. We'll see Toras maybe even a minute, right? They've been there for a long time. So therefore they can show you, how can you get rid of them? So the Gemara says, Rav Nachman says in Rav Ravua, in chazaka l'nizokin. There is no chazaka for damages. Very important klal. You can't say, I've got a chazaka to cause you injury. I've got a chazaka that I've been causing you damage. You know, my shor has been trampling your field every day for the past 3 years. That makes no difference. You can't do that. That's not a chazaka. The Gemara asks, but that statement is not so clear cut. V'lavit ma'ala, was it not taught on this? Rav Mary said it doesn't apply to every case. Bekutra, it only applies to real damage. There you go, Jeremy. Smoke, smoke, right? Not that type of cigarette. It applies, for example, if you're producing smoke, which is causing real and present damage to other people, their health, their property, their fields, whatever, you can't come along and claim, I've got a chazaka to cause you that damage. Rav Zvid said this rule applies with a latrine even. Yes, a beisakise. A toilet in those days was a serious business, outdoors, everything else, right? And it was on top of the ground, right? And therefore it was everything. It's disgusting and people see it and all that. That's why you can't claim a chazaka. You can't say I've got a chazaka to have positioned my outhouse in a place that is causing clear and present danger to you. That's called ein chazaka l'nizokin. You can't claim chazaka for damages. But he said the problem the Gemara is asking is that this rule was limited. It was limited to specific cases like smoke and a beisakise. It's not every case.
But also to
If
that,
you-
it still doesn't get around the issue of the fact that blood letters were not.
No, we're accepting it's indirect, and therefore there would be no liability, but it's still awesome. That was Rabbi Yosef's response. Exactly why the Gemara brings the story, right? Because Groma ben Ezekin is awesome. Right? That's the point.
The argument was, well, that they've been around for ages.
Yeah, look at that. And then we come on to the second question. Second question was, okay, fine, I accept that it's Osa, right? But they can turn around and say, we've got a chazaka to do this. On that, he responded by saying, chazaka, you can't have a chazaka to cause harm. Now, don't worry about Groma. We dealt with Groma. Groma is still Osa, right? They wanted to claim a chazaka to cause harm. You can't have a chazaka to cause harm, the Gemara says. You with me? Yeah? And the Gemara rebuts that and says, no, you only can't have a chazaka to cause harm in particular cases, like smoke or like a beis hakisei, but not every case. In this case, doesn't fit the parameters. Amalei, he said to him, it does, because hani ledidi, these for me, da anino datoi, I've got a very sensitive disposition. I don't particularly like eating dates which have other people's blood on. Ki kutra beis hakisei domuli. They are like smoke and a bathroom and a toilet for me. In other words, as I say, when they said kutra beis hakisei, smoke and a bathroom, they didn't mean only those cases. They mean cases that are similar to that, and these fit the criteria. For me, I'm just as sensitive to that. You with me? And that's the maskon of the Gemara. That in fact, the Gemara concludes that he had a right to tell these bloodletters to get lost, and they weren't allowed to sit there. Why? Because they couldn't claim chazaka, because it was significant harm, and you can't have a chazaka for nizakin, and it was and we hold Groma ben Ezekin is also. So it's true. What they were causing was indirect. It's also still not allowed. Yeah, still not allowed. Let's see Rashi. Very few Rashis. Umni, top of the omid, is Mekizei dam, blood letters. Kurkur is Orvim, ravens. Shadomim b'tzakos and kakurin kurkur. You know, when they cry, they're like kurkur. Afikuli, klema means to say al yakizuli oid kan. Don't let them cause any bloodletting here anymore. Shal kain ha'orvim boy, because on account of that, the ravens are coming. But kutra is ashran, is smoke, and beveis hakisei, Rashi explains shal gabi karka. They're specifically talking about a toilet that's above the ground. And that's why it's venira lainaim. Everyone can see it. Shekachoyu boti kesoy shalohed. Their toilets, that's how they work. By the time you get to Rashi in the Middle Ages, things had advanced somewhat. Not quite so we are now. Sorry, yeah, go on.
Sorry, factually it was the other way around. So the toilet was someone came and situated a toilet in a place, then someone came and located, say, a building or something nearby. Presumably that's not a problem because the person was there and they situated themselves.
That's fascinating. Look at the third Tosfos because he pretty much asked your question, not quite. Omer Rabbeinu Tam. It's always good to get. The great thing about saying you asked Tosfos asked the question is people like they can go home then. You know, she was like, "Oh, Tosfos asked the question. It doesn't matter what the answer. You asked the question. No, let's find the answer as well." Omer Rabbeinu Tam. So Rabbeinu Tam. So you see where Ein Chazokul in Nizokin? Third one down, where it says Ein. Yeah. Omer Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam says, "Da'afilu hikneloi." It's not quite your case, but it's similar enough. Afilu hikneloi be'edim. Even if he was makne to him the right to position that damage there. So basically, this guy who owns the toilet is not taking any chances, and he just take makabel kinyan in front of Edim. I've got a right to have my bathroom here. I don't want you to come later and complain. Yeah, I'm setting up a massive what they call this smoke. No, like one of those smoke tower, one of those huge chimney things in my back garden. Sign here, smokestack. That's it. Sign here that you're happy with the smokestack, right? That's what happens. The Rabbeinu Tam says even if he did that, yochel lachsavo, amazing. He can actually be chayzer. Yeah, he can go back against it. Why? And he can change his mind. The kinyan b'torsu. It's a mistaken kinyan. The savahu shihaya shiyochel lekabel. He thought he could accept it. Va'achshav ein yochel lekabel. And now he can't accept it, right? So I don't know if that's quite your. It's
quite harsh.
Well, Rabbeinu Tam says that you can't here go by the logical argument that you agreed because you didn't know what it would be like until it happened. And your case was if you buy the house
You're doing it
knowing.
nowhere, no one's around, and someone comes and situates themselves near you or muzzle.
Interesting. You're already there.
It's slightly different, because here you
It's
didn't
slightly
know you
different.
didn't have
Yeah,
a-
it's like, yeah. But either way, interestingly, not everyone agrees. I mean, Tosh himself says ve'ein nira. It doesn't seem Rabbeinu Tam's right. From the fact that it says there's no chazaka for nizokin, it can have made you can infer horaya yesh. There is a proof. You can prove that it's that you had a right to be there. And he brings a Gemora in Cheskes Abatim, which implies a similar thing. So in other words, the whole idea of no chazaka implies that I can't come along and say I've been here 3 years and therefore no one complained. I'm allowed to stay. But you can bring a proof. If I've got a piece of paper that you signed it away, the implication is that I'm okay. You with me? That's the potential argument. Yeah. I mean, Tosus also defines kutra as like a furnace, really like a large kivshon, which is a real furnace.
This Rav Yosef, when he says I've got a particularly delicate
Anistinus, he was anistinus, yeah.
Is similar to there's an eggshell, there's something called like an
Eggshell scar.
eggshell scar. If someone is in a fight and they push someone over and the guy dies because his scar was very thin, he's still liable.
Is that in English law?
Yes.
Really? There's been lots of cases, a number of very high-profile cases of cycling injuries. There was it was recently, there's a campaign to change the law.
You do the Dutch thing. You open the door like that.
That as well. What?
The highway code has just changed.
The highway code has changed, but also there are people who have knocked over. There are cyclists who have knocked over. There are cyclists who knocked over pedestrians. There might be an issue of thin skull, and they killed them. Fall on the ground, dead. Terrible. It's a terrible thing. But there's no real case in law for it. They found an arcane at the moment in the way the law stands in this country. There's the only criteria for man would be manslaughter, but it's not really, because it's like an arcane rule about horse riding. There's nothing. They want to bring in a particular law about cycling, but there might be to do with a thin skull as well. It's interesting that the Gemora. We'll just finish with this. Tosfos also brings a the Gemora in Psochim that says there are 3 people whose lives are not worth living. Okay, Harachmonim, those who have too much mercy, Voraschanim, those who get angry too easily, and Anine Hadas, people are too delicate natured, like too istinus. And Rabbi Yosef said, "V'kulu isnupi." I've got all of them. That's not one amazing God. Rabbi Yosef said, I've got all 3. It's a brilliant Gemara. That's the one I'm Psochim, right? Yeah. Okay, Mitzvah Hashem, we will continue next week. Yeah, I told you it'd be fascinating. I wrote in the message it'd be fascinating. All right. See you. Have a good evening. What was that? Yes.